Hello everyone, glad to be back. Today is 13th of May, now it's 12 o'clock, middle of the day by Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update today in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Usually I do second update on Patreon page, but unfortunately lately I wasn't able to do so because of shortage of time. After all, it's only 24 hours in a day, and to be honest, I'm thinking to make some changes in format because these second updates for Patreon not really work, as I understand, to generate some additional interest towards Patreon page to have a little bit more subscribers there. And because of it, I will ask you, if I may, if you are already subscribed to my Patreon or if you are considering to subscribe, what you will like to see on Patreon as an extra, what kind of content, and I will work from there. And if not every day, then at least a few times a week, I will try to make extras that are truly generating interest among our community. That's been said, let's talk about, and I guess I don't really need to explain how important Patreon and your support in general is to maintain this channel and continue this work. So that's been said, let's talk about news now, and I will start with Ukraine and special military operation. And of course, the first topic is Bakhmut. Situation around Bakhmut, and according to latest updates during the previous 24 hours, Zelensky's regime, forces that are still loyal to Zelensky, continue the local scale offensive operations with small mechanized groups in multiple directions, and they still achieve some additional success on the right flank of Bakhmut and on the left flank. Situation is truly strange and dramatic because while units of Russian armed forces are retreating on the flanks from Bakhmut, inside the Bakhmut, PMC Wagner units are managing to conduct successful offensive operations, and they are establishing new positions. They are moving forward. And yesterday afternoon, Prigozhin, head of PMC Wagner, did make statements that it's only about 20 high-rise buildings left in this so-called nest, and then it will take not that long to establish full control over the entire Bakhmut. So quite strange situation when inside the Bakhmut, PMC Wagner units are moving forward, achieving success, and on the flanks where units of Russian armed forces are located, they are retreating. And it's a third day in a row, and the situation truly raising questions now, because the first day one may say that it was surprised, and that's why surprise attacks, and that's why units retreat, Russian units retreat. I'm not buying this argument because you are on the front line. What kind of surprise can be there? You should expect attack of the enemy just constantly, always. But, second day, what happened second day? Why Russian units did retreat second day also? And the third day in a row, what is going on now? And to be honest, when I was trying to understand big picture, I come up with two scenarios, and I will share with you, and you tell me if these scenarios are possible, or maybe you have some other ideas. Share with me and with our community your opinion in comment section. So my scenarios are not mine. One is my scenario, but second is based on rumors that are circulating in internet. So First of all, I will remind you, if I may, that quite some time ago I did discuss possibility that some negotiations may take place behind the scenes between Zelensky's regime and Moscow, between Kiev and Moscow, about a humanitarian corridor between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar, so that Zelensky's regime will be able to withdraw forces, Bakhmut garrison, without heavy losses. And maybe this kind of negotiations truly had happened, and maybe Moscow did agree to give Zelensky's regime corridor or opening, so that Bakhmut garrison will be able to flee without fear that they will be destroyed. And if that's the case, then this way we may kind of explain what is happening on the flanks of Bakhmut, all these retreats of units of Russian armed forces. Because right now, as a result of retreats 3 days in a row, Zelensky's regime basically can easily use roads between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar. A week ago, these roads were under direct control of Russian forces or under strong artillery fire control, but now, no. Now, Zelensky's regime has enough corridor between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar to withdraw Bakhmut garrison without fear that they will be destroyed by Russian artillery or direct fire. So that's one scenario. I don't think this scenario is, too extremely realistic or too realistic, but at least this way we can explain what is going on the flanks of Bakhmut. And second scenario is based on rumors that are circulating in internet for a while now, really, since this conflict between leadership of PMC Wagner and the Russian Defense Ministry become public knowledge. And according to this scenario, yet again, which is based on rumors that are circulating in the internet, and I spoke about it in yesterday's update, Russian units of Russian armed forces are retreating on the flanks of Bakhmut because leadership of Russian Defense Ministry, Shoigu and Gerasimov and their clan, basically, they are trying to get rid of PMC Wagner and its leadership entirely. And that's why they are ordering to retreat. They are giving orders to Russian forces there to retreat, and this way, of course, if this will continue, of course, PMC Wagner units in Bakhmut will eventually end up in encirclement. And without support of army, no matter how professional Wagner PMC fighters are, in encirclement, they will not really have much chances. So you tell me which scenario is more possible or plausible. As I said, maybe you have some other explanation for current developments, but definitely strange. It seems strange that retreats of Russian units are happening exactly in this area, in and around the Bakhmut, nowhere else on this huge front line. At least I don't have information that Russian forces did retreat from any other area. So yes, that's when it comes to Bakhmut. And by the way, as I said, PMC Wagner units are continuing their offensive inside Bakhmut, and they are now operating inside this so-called nest or citadel. And it's only dozens of buildings are left, and entire these blocks will be under control of PMC Wagner. And then Prigozhin himself did said in his video statements yesterday that this area here with private housing is not big deal, and it will not take long for PMC fighters to establish control on that area. So let me continue now. We will have answers anyway in coming days. If before end of next week Zelensky's regime will withdraw garrison from Bakhmut, then we will know that first scenario that I share with you now probably was realistic. And if Bakhmut garrison did stay in the city, and if Zelensky's regime continue its local scale offensive operations, then eventually encircle PMC Wagner units in Bakhmut, then questions will definitely rise about intentional actions from leadership of Russian Defense Ministry to get rid of Wagner. So yes, let me continue with summarizing situation on the front line. Kherson region, it's artillery duels as usual. There are some reports on Ukrainian channels that Ukrainian forces did manage to establish some bridgehead on the left bank of the Dnieper River, but even this pro-Ukrainian map is not acknowledging this. So I think, and big channels are reporting this, big Ukrainian channels, and I think it's they are mistaken, or maybe they are intentionally trying to misinform society, or maybe even somehow raise influence in morale of Ukrainian forces this way, that they did establish some bridgehead on the left bank. But if even pro-Ukrainian map is not acknowledging this, then I truly doubt that they had achieved this kind of success. When it comes to Zaporozhya region, it's also artillery duels between the sides. Donetsk direction, it's usual hot points, Marinka and Avdiivka. In direction of Avdiivka, Russian side did manage to achieve some significant success. I did spoke about it yesterday, and to be honest, if Russian side will push a little bit more, I believe Avdiivka will end up in full encirclement. Now this city is under operational encirclement in my reading of this picture, and also quite serious activity is going on in direction of Kupiansk and in direction of Seversk. But main hot point, of course, is Bakhmut, without doubt. Let me continue now, and this is RIA Novosti's report, according to which there were some huge explosions and fires in Khmelnytskyi region during the previous night, and this is true. Russian side conducted yet another quite large-scale missile and drone strikes on logistical and military infrastructure of Zelensky's regime all around Ukraine, including western regions. And I did even share on my Telegram channel. This is Khmelnytskyi region, by the way, and just look at this.
Yeah.
So it seems like some ammunition depot was hit during this strike, maybe with military equipment. Also, probably there were some military equipments also, but when it comes to Khmelnytskyi region, and this is western part of Ukraine, as I understand, and there were some 10 huge explosions in Khmelnytskyi region. As I understand, the Russian side did manage to strike vast number of warehouses where Zelensky's regime was hiding its military equipment and ammunition. And I believe this strike of Russian side may be one of the most successful ones during the entire this special military operation. And strikes was not just explosions was heard not just in Khmelnytskyi region. Same goes for Lvov region, Nikolaev, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, and many other areas. So, And by the way, we have a report from Ukrainian side. This is Tass news agency reporting about information that was published on Ukrainian media outlets, Strana. And according to this information, 175 infrastructure facilities were fully or partially destroyed or damaged during the previous 24 hours. I guess majority of these infrastructure facilities or logistical hubs were destroyed during the previous missile and drone strikes. So quite vast number, isn't it? And this is the Ukrainian side is reporting. So if they are saying that it's 175 objects that were hit, probably there were some little bit more. Let me continue. This is RIA Novosti's report, according to which Zelensky's regime did begin use Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles that was delivered to Kiev by United Kingdom, by current government of United Kingdom. First use of Storm Shadow was yesterday, when Zelensky's terrorist regime did strike Lugansk city, and second time Storm Shadow missiles was used today, this morning, because Lugansk, suburbs of Lugansk were hit once again. This is quite significant development. Seems like Russian air defense systems are not really ready, at least in Lugansk region, to deal with these Storm Shadow missiles, but I guess Russian side will deploy S-300 or S-400 air defense systems in Lugansk, and then effectiveness of Storm Shadow will significantly decrease. But anyway, of course, United Kingdom did made a big step towards escalation with Russia by delivering these long-range missiles to Zelensky's terrorist regime, and I don't know when and how, but I guess Moscow one day will pay back, because this kind of stuff cannot be forgiven or forgotten. And unfortunately, steps that current leadership of Western states are made will influence relationships between the countries for decades to come. And if you know Russian history, you will agree with me that Russia will not forget and and won't forgive, and this means something. Let me continue now, and this is Tass news agency's report, according to which about 14,000 civilians did left Zaporozhya region in close vicinity from a front line, from settlements that are located right next to a front line. Quite small number, at least for this moment, but I guess there will be much more civilians that will be evacuated. This is not force for evacuation. It's up to citizens themselves to decide if they want to stay or evacuate. But because of this so-called counteroffensive of Zelensky's regime that will probably take place in direction of this land bridge between Crimea and mainland Russia, I guess there will be more and more civilians that will decide to evacuate. And by the way, you know my take on this so-called counteroffensive of Zelensky's regime. There will be no large-scale counteroffensive because they don't have enough forces to conduct such operation, but local-scale offensive operations Zelensky's regime are able to conduct because they have at least 50 to 70 or 80,000 more or less battle-ready military personnel, which is quite a lot for local-scale offensive operations. But anyway, as I said many times before, only way Zelensky's regime will achieve any success in any direction is if Russian units will receive order from leadership of Russian Defense Ministry to retreat or regroup. Anyone can use any terminology. But if there will be no such order and the Russian forces will stay and fight, then Zelensky's regime and units of Ukrainian armed forces that are unfortunately still loyal to this terrorist regime will have no chance. Let me continue now, and next information is about Germany's government, which is time after time are proving that they are a true danger for Germany. And this time, Spiegel News magazine, and this is Tass News agency is reporting about a publication that was in Spiegel News magazine. So according to this information, leadership of Germany did make decision to deliver to Ukraine military equipment for 2.7 billion euros in coming months. So Germany will become even more involved in this conflict. And as I said just now, a few minutes ago, about the current government of UK, I can repeat exactly the same about current government of Germany. They are making criminal steps that will influence relationships between the countries for decades to come, and I'm quite sure Russia will not forget and not forgive these extremely Russophobic and anti-Russian steps by UK's government, Germany's government, US government, or any other government of country that are involved in this conflict between Western elites and Russia. So, yes, Germany will deliver to Ukraine additional military equipment for 2.7 billion, and among the military equipment there will be 20 Marder armored personnel carriers, 30 Leopard 1 tanks, 200 intelligence or surveillance drones, some logistical equipment, and air defense systems, and also ammunition. Well, as I understand, Germany is main supplier of weapons to Ukraine right now, to Zelensky's terrorist and Nazi regime. And yes, I'm not really surprised, but it's truly sad, because I do understand that by these kind of steps, leadership of Western states are just destroying relationships between the countries for decades, and that's truly sad. That's truly sad. Of course, Russian side will anyway emerge victorious from this conflict. Anyway, no matter how much weapons Western elites gonna send to these terrorists in Ukraine, but you know, these kind of actions will at least prolong this conflict, and that means that there will be more casualties, more deaths, more destruction, which is, I mean, of course it's sad, man. Let me continue now, and this is Kommersant News paper's report about statements that Joseph Borrell made, the head of EU's foreign policy, or main diplomat of EU. And this time Borrell did make statements about China, and he said that basically he threatened China, or at least try, and he demanded that China should somehow influence Russia so that Russia will withdraw its forces from Ukraine. I mean, these guys are out of contact with reality, man. Out of touch with reality, really. Because, I mean, who are you talking to, for God's sake, man? And about what? Russia cannot withdraw forces from territory that Borrell thinks is Ukraine, because Russia, by Russian constitution, according to Russian constitution, Crimea Lugansk People's Republic, Donetsk People's Republic, Zaporozhya region and Kherson region are parts of Russia. So Russia cannot withdraw its forces from its own territory. That's the first thing. Secondly, I believe when this conflict will end, under Russian control will be not just these regions that I just mentioned, but also Kharkov region, at least, and also Dnipropetrovsk, entire region of Zaporozhya, Kherson, LPR, DPR, of course Crimea, and also Odessa region. That's at least. And secondly, I mean, China, man. Borrell is talking about China, for God's sake, man. If they will even try to impose sanctions on China in a way that they did on Russia, I guess it will take only like 10 to 12 months, and EU's economies will start collapsing. That's how dependent European states are on China. So who are they threatening? I mean, it don't really makes any sense in any ways, but yes, that's people that are ruling EU, and these people, most importantly, no one did even vote for these guys. They are not even elected by anybody in Europe. But very same people are destroying European economies and European states and the lives of Europeans, citizens of European states. But yet again, I find it truly difficult to understand why majority on these EU member states are so passive, and they are not doing nothing to stop this madness. Let me continue now. This is TASS News Agency's report, according to which Ukraine, Zelensky's regime is afraid. They are delaying this so-called, or anticipated by many, counteroffensive, because they are afraid that if they will fail with this counteroffensive, they will lose support of West. Well, Zelensky's regime is correct in this. They already are losing support in the West, because everyone understands that after all, eventually, Russia will win anyway. And I guess European elites, little by little, but will lose appetite for this conflict, and will start distance themselves, not just from Zelensky and current leadership of Ukraine, but also from Ukraine itself. And when it comes to counteroffensive, I did said, man, Zelensky's regime has no chance, man. They have no chance. They may achieve, if they start this local scale on counteroffensive, because they have up to, let's say, 8,000 reserves. For the first few days, they may achieve some local scale success for the first few days, but then Russian side will stop them, and once these reserves of Zelensky's regime will run out of steam, then it will be Russian turn to conduct offensive. And I believe this reserve that Zelensky's regime had concentrated in Zaporozhya and Kherson region will be destroyed, decimated by Russian side. That's what will happen. And after that, entire front line, Ukrainian units will start collapsing all the way on the front line. And very same time, we may say that this failure of Zelensky's counteroffensive will be beginning of the end of his presidency. It's just too obvious, really, isn't it? So let me continue. This is TASS News Agency's report. I find it quite strange that Russian media outlets, state-run media outlets, did share this information simultaneously, and that's why I decided to share it with you. That's how propaganda, that's example of propaganda, really works. Lately, as you know, because of this confrontation between Shoigu and leadership of Russian Defense Ministry become entered public domain, and many people are now informed about this confrontation. Probably leadership of Russian Defense Ministry are trying now to conduct some damage control media operation, and as a result, Russian state-run media outlets, and TASS, of course, is a state-run news agency, like RIA Novosti, like many others, they are simultaneously now sharing information that head of Ukraine's general staff, Zaluzhny, in his interview during the one of documentaries that he was participating in, said that he is reading all the scientific works of Gerasimov, and he was he was making some compliments towards Gerasimov in that interview, that, you know, according to him, Gerasimov is, good specialist. He knows what he's doing, and the rest of, you can imagine. Zaluzhny, I don't know why Zaluzhny said what he said. If he even said this, I did not watch that documentary. That's what Russian media outlets are reporting. But at the same time, it's also understandable that heads of military leaders should never underestimate enemy, and should conduct themselves with some dignity towards each other. So in this sense, I can understand why Zaluzhny was complimenting Gerasimov. It's nothing strange there, but why Russian media outlets are writing about it like it's a big deal, that's a question. Who cares about Zaluzhny? He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal and should be put in prison for life. And if he's complimenting Gerasimov, one may take this in a very different way. One may think that, maybe Zaluzhny is happy with Gerasimov because there are conflict between the sides. And maybe Zaluzhny is happy with Gerasimov because because he is afraid that if someone else will come head of Russian general staff, under his command, Russian army may achieve much more success. Let's say this way. But anyway, it seems like Russian Defense Ministry, leadership of Russian Defense Ministry, did realize that their reputation, their ratings are quite low. Recently, I even see some poll on one of the quite big Russian language Telegram channel, and there were polls there. And the question was, do you agree that Shoigu should resign? Something like that. And when I saw at that moment, I saw it day before yesterday, that poll, some 82% of people who participate in this poll was saying yes. They want Shoigu to be gone. Of course, this is just a poll on one Telegram channel, quite big Telegram channel. And it cannot be, implemented. You cannot say that entire society thinks this way, but at least this kind of polls on different channels give you some idea of public opinion in Russia. And yes, this is a typical attempt of damage control from leadership of Russian Defense Ministry, in my opinion, because, who cares about Zaluzhny, man, and who he is complimenting? And question is why he is complimenting Gerasimov. Maybe he is afraid that one day someone else may become head of general staff, and under his command, Russian side may achieve much more significant success on the front line. Who knows, man? But anyway, let's continue. How long is this video? 34 minutes. So yes, I have to finish this. I will go through headlines. So this is RIA Novosti's report, according to which President of Turkey, Erdogan, was very critical of his main opponent during the upcoming presidential elections, which will take place tomorrow, as I understand, on 14th of May. And Yes, let's see how will situation develop in Turkey, because opponent of Erdogan, main opponent, I will try to find his name now. Kılıçdaroğlu, that's main opponent of Erdogan. He did made recently quite strong statements towards Russia, quite unpleasant statements towards Russia, and that's why Erdogan did criticize him, because relationships with Russia is under current government of Turkey. Relationships with Russia and Turkey are quite friendly and on a good terms, but yet again, recently there are more and more reports on the media that Erdogan may lose elections, or even if he will receive majority of votes, he will not be able to stay in power, because West will conduct regime change in that case. And yes, if West will put their puppets in Turkish government, then it's quite obvious that relationships between Turkey and Russia will deteriorate very fast and very significantly. It will be devastation for Turkish economy. I'm quite sure about it, but come on, man, do European elites or puppets of Western masters, puppets of Western elites, ever care about economies and ordinary people? Of course not. So this Kılıçdaroğlu is a puppet, of course, of Western elites, and all will he do is to, all he will care is to please his Western masters in Washington, in London. And yes, he will destroy Turkish economy. I'm quite sure about it, if he will become president of Turkey. Just remember my words. If this person will become, this puppet of West will become president of Turkey, Turkish economy will collapse in about 12 to 18 months. Just remember this. Let me continue now, and this is Lenta room, according to which, and by the way, these rumors are not stopping to circulate in media about Kinzhal that was shut down by Patriot air defense systems, and here in Lenta room there are some experts analyzing information, and yet again, everyone is skeptical, because Patriot just don't really have technical, Patriot is just technically not capable to deal with hypersonic missiles. And I do believe, I don't understand why this is even a topic. I mean, after all, any missile can be shut down or should be shut down by mistake, by this or by that reason. But even if they shut down Kinzhal, then what's the deal? I mean, and what? And what? Washington wants to sell its Patriots, to do some advertise for its Patriots. And by the way, this attempt to advertise Patriot, if it's advertisement, it works exactly opposite way, because after all, in many countries, people do have quite good education, and they do understand that missiles that are flying with a speed of 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers an hour cannot shut down missiles that are flying with hypersonic speeds. Just cannot. You can calculate trajectory of missile, but after all, in the final phase of flight, Kinzhal is changing its direction. Kinzhal is changing its direction, so even by, if you have supercomputers on the Patriot batteries, they can maybe calculate ballistic trajectory of the missile, flight path. But if in a final phase, missile is changing its course, then no matter how good your computing system is on this air defense system, it will be unable to guess in which direction missile will go next. So that's why there are so many reasons why I don't believe that Patriot will ever be able to shut down Kinzhal missile. But even if he did, I mean, who cares, for God's sake? Why it's a big deal? I mean, I truly don't understand. Let me continue, and this is TASS News Agency's report, according to which finance ministers and heads of central banks of G7 countries did agree that in next 12 months, let's say from 2023 to 2024, they will spend additional $44 billion on Ukraine. Additional $44 billion on Ukraine for Zelensky's Nazi and terrorist regime. Well, how are you going to comment this, man? I mean, this is pure madness, and if citizens of these G7 countries are happy that their money have been spent this way by the elites, then okay. Let me continue, and this is a statement, this is Kommersant newspapers report, according to which Biden did make statement that US will destroy its chemical weapons up before end of this year, before September, really, and well, information is good. I mean, if US will destroy chemical weapons, it's a good step, but can you trust Biden and his administration? That's the question. And to be honest, I'm not sure that these chemical weapons that US will say that they did destroy it won't end up in hands of, let's say, Zelensky's regime or somewhere else. I mean, US elites don't have trust whatsoever. You cannot trust them. Just cannot. So, in theory, of course, all countries should destroy chemical weapons. Russia already did destroy its chemical weapons. US didn't. All countries should get rid of chemical and biological weapons, but as you can see, man, Western elites cannot be trusted for even for a second. Just cannot be trusted. Let me continue now, and that's also interesting news. More than 61 Republican congressmen did demand from Biden to have some medical checking about his intellectual abilities, to make sure that he's still here. And yes, of course, Biden not gonna go under any medical checking and stuff. It's too obvious that he's not really in this world, or at least not all the time. He's too old, and not just too old, but I mean, he's losing it. He's just losing it, man. And it's too obvious for everybody. I mean, Biden and his administration, they are just embarrassment for US. Let's be clear about it. And hopefully, after 2024, US will have some other president and more adequate administration. Because world needs this. I mean, world needs more adequate leadership in the US. So, yes, and this is going to be last news for today's update. Unfortunately, Russia reveals a larger than expected budget deficit. So, because of failing oil and gas revenues and some other problems due to these thousands and thousands of sanctions from Western elites, currently deficit of Russian budget is 3.42 trillion rubles, which is $45 billion. One may say no big a deal. It's only $45 billion, which is, Russia, as you know, has about $500 billion in reserves. But still, it's unfortunate, of course. It's unfortunate. Hopefully, in coming years, Russian economy will manage to become fully independent from Western economies. Will establish some new trade routes, new communications with the rest of the world, and as a result, Russian income of Russian budget will increase significantly, and there will be no deficit at all. Because in previous years, Russian budget was proficient. Russian budget had a deficit when income are much more than Russia was spending during the years. So yes, this information, is not too big of a deal, but still these numbers of deficit is indicating that Russian economy is still struggling to deal with these Western sanctions, but eventually everything will be okay. So yes, this is it for now. I hope you will find this update interesting, and if so, please hit that like button, leave some commentary about any topic you like. I'm trying to be active in comment sections whenever I can and react on most of the comments, at least to say thank you. And if you can, please share links to my videos or my channel with your friends on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, or any other platform that you are active on. And if you think this channel is interesting, has some potential and deserves to exist in this field of news and political commentary, please consider to support with small donations through PayPal, Buy Me Coffee, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. I will be very grateful for your help. That's been said, this is it for now. I wish you a great weekend. And take care. See you soon.